guys, Jeremy here with Simple Little Life, and welcome to another edition of Tool Time Tuesday. This week I'm going to show you how I mark my knives. A couple reasons why you might want to put a mark on a blade. First one, probably the most popular, would be to put your logo or your maker's mark on a knife. Another reason that a lot of knife makers like to mark their knives is to put the steel that they use to make it, identify the materials. And thirdly, maybe a little more personal, sometimes you might want the recipient's name on a blade, or they would like their name on a knife. Or an example, last week I made 2 knives and they were groomsmen gifts, and the groom, who's actually now my brother-in-law, which is awesome, he wanted their wedding date on the knife. So lots of different reasons why you would want to mark your knives, and there's a lot of different ways you can do it. There's quite a few different videos out there about different home-brewed methods and very inexpensive ways to do it, and I've tried a few of them and I just have not had the success and the results that I want doing those. So I ended up going and buying a couple pieces of equipment. The first one is the Mark 440 stencil maker, and the second thing that I actually used to mark the steel is the Personalizer Plus. So we'll have a look at these, I'll kind of explain why I went with them, and I'll show you them in use. Also, I just want to give a shout out to Tyler. Hey Tyler. Tyler is one of my son's friends. He's a young man, and 2 years ago I had the pleasure of coaching him in hockey, and we're getting back into the hockey routine again, and we were at the arena last night, and he came up to me and talked to me, and he watches this channel, and he watches it religiously, which I think is cool because somehow I don't think that anybody around me watches it. It's kind of more of a specific audience, but he's an aspiring knife maker, super talented young kid, full of energy, always fun to be around, and I just want to say hi, Tyler. All right, let's get at it. All right, so the first step in this process is to make your stencil. This is a special stencil material that comes with the marking of the stencil maker kit. And essentially it's like a very fine screen mesh with a light sensitive medium on both sides. I don't know if it's a gel or type of a plastic film or something, but when you work with this stuff, until it's developed, you need to be in complete darkness. So what I'll typically do is just mask off any light leaks. I'll put cardboard over the windows, just get it completely black, and then I will use a red LED headlamp because that light is safe. It won't affect the stencil at all, and you'll still be able to see what you're doing. And you're going to print your stencil, your design, your letters, whatever you'd like, onto transparency paper. This is just like that old school stuff they used to use with the overhead projectors, long before PowerPoint and all that jazz. But really, you just print it off here. You need to get the right paper, the right transparency paper for your printer, whether it's an inkjet or a laser jet. So make sure you have that lined up, get the right stuff for your printer, and simply print what you'd like your stencil to be. This one, I was experimenting with a couple different fonts for the date on that knife, and I find that 10 point is about the smallest I like to go. Smaller than that, and sometimes you just don't get a great quality, clean, crisp stencil. But with 10 point, it works fairly well. So you'll print that onto your piece of transparency paper. Here you can see I've got this one done. This was for the knives I did for the weekend. Also, this is my logo. This is just the E in Homestead knives. And put that onto your transparency paper, and then in complete darkness, you'll take your undeveloped piece of stencil. You'll place it in the bottom tray of this stencil maker here. Stencil down first, there's no side that needs to be up, they're both the same. And you'll simply put your transparency paper on top. And what that's doing is creating a shadow. You're going to protect the light. So when you're printing, another important setting is that you want to print black. You don't want grayscale, you want it to be as dark as possible. And all you'll do is set it down on top of your transparency, on top of your stencil material, and set it down in the way that you can read it correctly. It doesn't have to be upside down or backwards or any crazy stuff like that. Set it down so that it's legible to yourself, and then sandwich that with this little piece of glass that it comes with. All that really does is hold it from wiggling around. Once you're at that point, you're ready to put it into the UV light. And all this is a little piece of sheet metal with a bulb, and it's got a UV bulb on there. And you stick it in like that. I like to make sure my logo is centered. Whatever I want stenciled is centered under the light, and you'll simply turn it on. Now, the manufacturer recommends that you leave this on for 2 to 3 minutes, 2 to 2.5 minutes, and experiment. But I found that 1 minute is the most I like to leave it exposed for. So In complete darkness, put it in there, turn the light on for 1 minute, and then let it sit for 1 minute. So don't even touch it. I just use my stopwatch. 1 minute it sit. Now you can go ahead and put it in the developer. So to do that, you're going to take it out. You'll take your transparency off. You could use that again if you'd like to. Save that for later. And on both sides of this stencil is a Mylar plastic sheet. And you have to pull that off. And that's probably the trickiest part of this whole process. You have to fiddle with it and you peel the plastic off both sides. And then you've got your raw stencil ready to be developed. And with the kit, they give you a special developer solution. I'm not sure what it is or what it does, but once you got your Mylar peeled off, you'll put it in there. At this point, it doesn't look like anything has happened. You won't see the logo coming through or your letters, and you kind of wonder if anything really did happen. But you'll put it in your developer, kind of swish it around a little bit, and then you take this little sponge, it's sort of a coarse sponge, and you just start rubbing where your logo was, and you'll start rubbing the medium away that was protected from the light. So that gel or that film on there that wasn't exposed to the light, that will start washing off, and the rest of it will start getting harder and a darker blue. So you're developing the part that was exposed to the UV light, and you're rinsing off the part that wasn't. And what you're left with is basically a screen that's, clear screen area in those number spaces or your logo space. And really, liquid will pass through there now. So I've got a watertight seal everywhere else, but liquid will actually pass through that area, and we've created like a screen that's in the shape of those numbers or your logo or whatever it is that you're marking. So that's done. I usually switch it around here for about 2 minutes each side. And again, I do this in the darkness. Once you're done that, you just run it under water, and then I pat it dry with a paper towel. Just rinse it under water, get all the slimy, it's kind of got a slimy feeling to it. And you rinse it until it doesn't feel slimy anymore. And you've got your stencil. Now it's safe. You can take it outside. You don't have to worry about exposing it to light because the developer has stopped all of that process, and it's sealed up. It's a final product. So once that is done, pop this back on, you're done with the stencil maker. Put that away, and the first part of this process is over. All right, so for the second part of the process, the actual etching, I use the Personalizer Plus. That's this machine right here. It's got two settings on it, a mark and an etch. And I typically leave it to the mark, which is just the black marks. The etch will actually eat away at the material and actually cause an indentation in the steel. A lot of people like that. A lot of times it looks great. I'm not a huge fan for the stuff that I do. I kind of like just to have the nice mark on there, the black mark, so I just leave it to mark. And then I don't have this plugged in right now, but this is your on-off switch, and you can adjust your power setting. And I usually run it at about 3. It seems to work for me. On the other end of these leads, you've got a positive and a negative. The positive is what you clamp to the blade or the steel that you're going to etch. The negative is what you use as a brush to mark it. They call this a carbon brush. I'm not sure exactly what it is. And then on top, it's like a synthetic wool or something, just something to hold the electrolyte solution that you use. They sell with the kit, they give you this electrolyte solution. I've heard of a lot of guys, even guys that use this, they'll simply use a very strong concentration of salt water, and that seems to work really good for them as well. For the homebrew guys also, instead of the carbon brush on the negative side, a lot of times they'll just have an alligator clip and clip that to the end of a Q-tip and then dip that into the electrolyte solution. Ultimately, you just want the electricity to be flowing through the electrolyte solution through your stencil and onto the material, and it's that electrical reaction that causes the dark marks to show up. So I'm going to set up the camera, and I'll just get a piece of scrap metal and I'll show you how this works. So once you've got your steel that you're going to mark, I don't have any knives ready to be marked right now. Also, I don't have a proper stencil. This is the old one I'm reusing, but you want to clean up your steel. I just use a little lacquer thinner, wipe it all off there. I've got a bunch of blue layout dye on this one, so get that all cleaned up. And then you don't want to touch it. You don't want any oils from your hands, your skin on that. You want that to stay nice and clean and ready for a nice crisp etch. If you've got oils on there, it can kind of inhibit the ability of the chemical to etch, and you just don't get the greatest, cleanest, smoothest results. So I'm going to do this and try and work around the camera here. Hopefully it works. You do want to take a little consideration, a little care when you're doing this, that you're going to be putting a clamp onto your blade. like this. We'll try putting this one right here, and just think about it, you know, be a little careful. You don't want to scratch your blade when you're doing this, but so far I haven't had any issues with that, but it's just something to keep in mind. Anytime you've got a knife that's pretty much finished, you want to, you know, be careful in how you're handling it. So all I'll do is I'll take my electrolyte solution, put a little bit on there. Like I say, some people feel the need, or they say you should be daubing it somewhat dry. I just use it as it is and haven't had issues. So what I'll do is I'll turn on my Personalizer Plus. And there's different settings. I usually go about the 3. I set it to 3. I don't really know what that value relates to, but... And then you'll set your stencil there. A good idea when you're doing this could be to tape it in place so it doesn't move much. But all you'll really do is wipe it across. And like I say, you'll hear a humming noise. You'll hear and sometimes when you pull it up, you'll see little bubbles because your electrolyte solution is actually boiling. But just wipe it over there a few times like this. It really doesn't take that much. And big thing is you want to keep those numbers still. This might not be the cleanest mark because I don't have this taped down securely, but that's pretty much it. Now we pull that off and we've got our mark on there. And then they sell with the kit, I mean, it comes with a neutralizer, and that's all fine and dandy if you'd like to do that. I just, I use Windex because it works. And I'll give that a little shot of Windex. Pull our clamp off there. Windex will just neutralize that whole process and stop any further etching or marking, and then I just kind of pat it dry like that. And then usually I'll put a little bit of oil on there and let it sit for about a minute or two, just so that it stops any further possible corrosion to the steel, especially if you're working with like an O1 tool steel or something. I'll see if I can get a close-up of this for you. So there's the mark we just put on our steel, and that's a permanent mark. Pretty much the same thing with any, you know, you buy a knife and it's got like Benchmade or Kershaw, whatever it is on there. That's pretty much the same process, and it's going to stay there. It's there for good. And it looks good. It's nice, clean, a nice professional looking finish. And you know, you can do your logo. A lot of people's logos and maker marks are really quite intricate. You know, there'll be like a little oval, they'll say handcrafted by Jeremy and yada yada. And so you can actually do some really nice intricate stuff. The thing that will determine how good it looks when it's done is how good your stencil is when you make it. So if you take your time, make a nice clean stencil, you'll get nice clean results. Alright guys, so there's a quick look at what I use to mark my knives. If you're like me and you've tried the home brewed methods, different things, and you're kind of like, meh, not entirely pleased with them, these are great options to go with. I'm going to leave the company information in the description below. Keep in mind, full disclosure, I do not get anything from these companies for doing this video. I bought this myself. They don't know I'm doing this video. They don't know I'm reviewing it or showing it to you. So this is straight up information, and I really like these products and I think they're well worth the investment. So might be good for you too. Another option though is that you can get these stencils made up, and that would save you from buying a stencil making machine. And a couple tips I'd like to leave you with that I've learned that have been trial and error. First one being exposure time. If you're going to make your own stencils, I would go for a minute and start there. They recommend 2 to 2.5 minutes, and I simply found that to be way too long. Obviously, I think it will vary depending on your climate, humidity, and all that stuff, but start out with a minute and see how it goes. Second little thing, when you're developing stencils, I tried doing about 4 or 5 different stencils at once, and it didn't work very well. I think the spread of the light was inconsistent, and so some of the stencils turned out really well, but some of the ones on the outside weren't properly exposed, and they didn't, you know, I wasn't able to rinse all the gel away in the developer solution. So keep that in mind. When I do my stencils now, I do them one at a time, and I center the stencil right underneath the light so it's as consistent and intense as possible. Something to keep in mind. Once you've got your stencil made, I've tried holding them in place with electrical tape and masking tape, and I find that both of them start to degrade the stencil quite quickly. They'll stick to it or they'll peel it apart. So what I do is, just like in that demonstration, I'll actually typically most of the time I'll just hold it in place, and once I start going on there with that brush and the electrolyte solution gets underneath there, a tendency is it kind of sucks itself to the metal, just like if you had anything wet and you put a piece of plastic on it, it kind of forms a little and squishes itself in. So I actually find these stencils do the exact same thing, and just holding it with my fingers, I'm having really good results doing that way, and then I don't have to tape up my stencils and they last longer. And then when you're storing your stencils, I put them in between a couple of pieces of paper and in a file folder, you know, squish them between some books or something like that. You want to keep them nice and flat, and then just pat them dry when you're done with them. That's pretty much it. Look after them. You want to kind of pull them out right when you're going to use them and put them away again. Not something you really want to leave around the shop, because any grinding, abrasives or anything like that, they're going to start tearing away at this stuff. It is fairly sensitive, fairly delicate, but same time works really good, and such a clean finish you can get when you're using these stencils. All right, now just to wrap up the video, I just want to do a quick reminder of the contest that we have coming up. Once I reach 20,000 subscribers, we're going to give away a knife that we made. You can find the video on that up here, and as well as we're going to give away a packet of materials. So that will include O1 tool steel, G10 material, and some pin materials so that you can make your own knife. Now, I announced this contest back when I had like 2,000 subscribers, and I really didn't know if I would ever get to 20. But I think right now I'm at like 17,000 subscribers, so it's looking pretty good. Once we get there, I'll do a video with all the specific details. You're gonna comment on that video that I put up after I've reached 20,000. It'll be very clear in the title, comment here to win, and we'll be getting that contest underway shortly. I appreciate all your support, everything you've done for the channel. If you like it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and share the video. Appreciate everything you do. Thanks a lot, guys. You have a great day. Cheers.